diplomatic face-off between India and Canada. External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar is on a 5-day visit to the US, remember. On Thursday, he met State Secretary Antony Blinken and both spoke on a number of issues. Now, after the meet, Matthew Miller, the spokesperson for the US State Department, said that he won't disclose private diplomatic discussions or statements, but reiterated the US stance, which is that India is encouraged to cooperate with the Canadian investigation. Let me remind you though that despite repeated reminders, Canada is yet to provide any evidence or further specific information, as the External Affairs Minister said, based on which the Canadian Prime Minister made such public allegations. Meanwhile, Justin Trudeau has softened his stance against India, it seems. While addressing the media in Montreal, he stated that Canada is serious about building closer ties with India, given its growing importance on the world stage. This statement comes 11 days after his speech in the House of Commons, where he accused India of involvement in Mysore killing. He expected a lot of support, possibly from the Five Eyes allies, but got little. So has Trudeau softened his stance under pressure? Has he realized his stunt has actually backfired? Has Canada been forced to fall in line? We'll take those questions to our guests in just a bit. But first up, let me break down what exactly transpired as far as Jaishankar's meeting with Antony Blinken is concerned. Remember, not much that they will disclose publicly, but this is what we have been indicated. Both leaders, of course, discussed India's G20 presidency outcome. That has been a big plus for India and for the world as far as recent conflicts and climate is concerned. They also spoke on India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, which was crystallized further on the sidelines of the G20. There was no mention of the Canada issue as far as the State Department press release is concerned. However, as often it happens, via sources, what has come out is in Washington DC is that they told India they spoke about Niger's killing during the meeting and told India or asked India to cooperate as far as the probe is concerned. This is virtually on the same lines that US has maintained over the last 1 week or 10 days. They haven't really gone further from that. Let's also take a look at what Trudeau has said as far as his own statement is concerned. It's been quite a story in 10 days, because a lot of his words, his phrasings that he had used while leveling those credible allegations against India have come under the hammer. So I just want to compare his first speech versus what his last public statement has been. On September 18, he had said there are potential links between Indian agents and Niger's killing. Now he has said that India is an important geopolitical player, complete change in tone. He's not really reiterating what Canada stands for and what it will not tolerate, etc., etc. Earlier he had said, and of course this is a statement that went viral, continues to embarrass Justin Trudeau, that there are credible allegations against India or credible reasons to believe that India is involved. From that, he now says that the Canada is serious about building closer ties with India. Also on September 18, he had said that foreign hand in Canadian citizens' killing is unacceptable to them. Remember, wherever Justin Trudeau goes, he keeps talking about what Canadian values are, what they will stand for and not stand for. And frankly, sometimes it's a little bit irritating for other global leaders because it's almost preachy, as if he's talking down to them. He's cut that a little bit. And now finally he has said that there is a need to engage with India constructively and seriously. But I want to break down for our viewers just why this change of tone has taken place as far as Justin Trudeau is concerned. It's not that he's changed his politics. Remember, his ultra-liberal politics at home is already in doldrums. His government is a minority government being supported by quote-unquote Khalistani sympathizers. But here are the big reasons, the 5 big reasons why Justin Trudeau is changing his stance or retreating. Number 1. There has been a very strong response from India, which has actually garnered more support, not just internationally, but even in India. Justin Trudeau's allegations have in no way affected what Indians feel about their sovereignty, their territorial integrity. And if there was anybody on the planet that thought that India is going to be embarrassed if such allegations are going to be made, frankly, that has not happened. Most of the international community is supporting India. Number 2. There have been reports of the botched criminal investigation of Niger's killing in Canada that have ended up embarrassing Canada. So if you couldn't get your house in order, exactly what business do you have making these allegations against others? On what proof? On what basis? Next, US and other allies have not been very pro-Canada. Of course, they don't want to hurt either India or Canada, but they have made it very clear they are not willing to antagonize India. And that's why Trudeau is now changing his tune to saying that India is a very important ally and we want to build stronger relationships with the country. Then why did you go down this path? Why did you expel a diplomat and out their name if you really wanted that? So he's retreating. Number 4, episode has also brought Canada's murky history with Khalistanis to fore. And this is something I've been discussing quite a bit with global experts over the past 1 week or so. The silver lining here is that actually more and more people today would be aware of the Khalistani history in Canada, something that is deeply embarrassing to their security establishment and to current regime as well. And finally, Trudeau just hasn't had a very good 2 weeks, mind you. The recent Nazi soldier salute disaster has also weakened his credibility, and this is frankly not the time that he would want to have more fires on his table. On that note, this is the big debate that's coming up. As Trudeau softens his stance, is it that Canada has been forced to fall in line for all the reasons I said and more? We'll take that forward with our guests.
Have consistently engaged with the Indian government on this question and have urged them to cooperate, and that engagement and the urge for them to cooperate will continue.
Let's go across to our guest joining us. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti is former secretary, MEA. Charlotte Littlewood is research fellow, Henry Jackson Society. And Terry Miluski, author, Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project, is also joining us. Terry, I want to begin with you. Would you agree that Justin Trudeau has indeed softened his stance in the sense that he really now wants to see the back of this episode because it wasn't really helping him or his government?
Well, it sure hasn't worked. The whole world and Canadians too are all waiting to see if he really has the goods.
Yes.
And we don't understand why he hasn't produced the evidence. I would differ with you, though, to some degree. I don't think this is a new line. Long ago, Canada decided that it needed India as an ally and as a friend and explored better trade ties and a free trade agreement. Of course, now that's all out the window, and naturally, Mr. Trudeau wants to salvage it. But it's not really a change of tune. It's simply a change of emphasis that we want to listen to the news, obviously, and the news in what he has been saying lately has been the accusation that India has been involved in murder on Canadian soil. And now we're back to the long-term background of the effort by the Trudeau government to court India and to be its friend. Well, whether that's
Terry,
even
just
possible,
sorry, I'm interrupting you just for a brief
question.
minute. Just to press on this
Go
point.
ahead.
Just to press on this point, now I agree with what you're saying that Canada did in fact recently unveil an Indo-Pacific strategy of which India is a very important part. So yes, the long-term Canadian vision may have been to build stronger ties with India, and that's not rocket science. But Trudeau's actions were not so. One, making this public allegation, expelling an Indian diplomat, outing that diplomat's name, putting their security at risk, not really acting when there were, tableaus of Indira Gandhi's assassination being paraded in Canada, or when there were posters coming up of threats to Indian diplomats. So I'm just putting that in perspective. The actions were not matching that philosophy of building a stronger tie with India. And maybe what Justin Trudeau is doing now is, okay, let me stop harping on Nidjar. That's not helping me. Let me instead focus on what we can do together.
Yes, and that's reasonable. But it's also reasonable, isn't it, that I think the point you're making is that Canada can't have it both ways. Both that we're your friend, let's have a free trade agreement, and at the same time we're going to accuse you of murder.
Yes.
It's very difficult to carry out. You got to pick a lane. Well, you flip it around if you can. Flip it around and imagine that it emerged that Trudeau knew that this kind of activity was going on and didn't say anything because he was after a free trade agreement. When that came out, he'd be in some trouble, I think. I think the Canadians would say, well, he would have been attacked, I think. I hope, if he found out that such crimes were going on at the hands of a foreign government, any foreign government, and didn't say anything because he thought, well, we mustn't jeopardize our trade ties, so let them come to our country and murder people. I don't think that's a plausible scenario at all. I think he wants to have it both ways, but in order to have any progress at all on a better relationship with India, we all know that Canada has to be much more serious about addressing India's concerns about the growth, the toleration, and the pandering to Khalistani extremists in Canada. That's something has to change on that front, and soon. Then these remarks about our wonderful future relationship with India, that might come true, but not before.
Yes, and Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, I want you to weigh in on this. Teddy has hit the nail on the head. You can't have it both ways. You cannot publicly embarrass India, try to embarrass India, drag them through the mud without any evidence that you're willing to present in the public domain, even if he did it for political reasons, where, let's say, pressure was building on him back home, where he needed to say something. He could have chosen a better way to do it. It could have been not maybe in the House of Commons, but outside in a press conference. It could have been by a diplomat or a foreign affairs, a member, then the Prime Minister himself. And certainly they didn't need to expel an Indian diplomat in the manner that they did. But if he really wants to walk the talk with India of good relationships, as he's talking about, there's a lot of mending to do. And the first thing you need to do is show us the proof that you're acting on Khalistani sympathizers in Canada.
Well, all this has been said, and my own personal view is that that Canada has been ignoring India's requests for action on the Khalistanis and the gangsters and the terrorists for the last 40 years. Ever since Canadians blew up Air India 182 and killed 329 people, Canadians themselves investigated and realized that they had ignored every intelligence that was available. And all the killers went scot-free. You look at the commission report, if you read it, it is horrifying.
Yes.
That a responsible government, which Canada claims to be, a democracy, liberal, etc., etc., this is what they did. We haven't forgotten that. Indians don't forget. We are the elephant, we have long memories. And then thereafter, all these Khalistanis have been going there. Justin Trudeau is very right that Canadians murdered in Canada is not acceptable. For India, Canadians murdering Indians in Punjab and elsewhere is also not acceptable. And what have you done about it? And then he talks about intelligence, credible allegations, etc., using sweet phrases like that, which mean nothing. And then he says that we have simply made allegations. Where's the proof? You say you have SIGINT and HUMINT, that is signal intelligence and human intelligence. Okay, forget the human intelligence because that will compromise their human sources. But where is the SIGINT? Is it a telephone call from somebody to somebody that go and kill this guy? Or is it simply a conversation saying, oh, this guy has been killed? I mean, I can speculate on and for hours. It doesn't help because unless you give evidence, you want us to cooperate. I think EM has said so.
Yes.
We are willing to look at the evidence. But this kind of, public gimmickry is not going to help.
Do you think India has very rightly put that message across that they're not going to stand for this? And that is one of the reasons that Canada has had to backtrack a little bit, because this is not the same India that was refused the extradition of Parmar on flimsy grounds that India doesn't consider the royal monarch as the constitutional head.
Well, I know that that's an old story. We all know that. And what an argument. I mean, all I can say, I don't want to use strong words, but I've been in diplomacy for 40 years and I've dealt with Canada also during my time, I think. And I know how they behave. In fact, their kind of moral preaching that we used to get once in a while. And we ignored it thinking that, it's okay, it's in their DNA to talk like that. We will do our business and let's get on with it. So, but now it's not possible to get on and business as usual because they have gone out on a limb. Trudeau particularly, has gone out on a limb and he has to walk back.
Okay.
And unless he produces proof, and we are willing to look at it, as we said, we were friendly nations. I'm saying were because I don't know how long we will remain friendly. But I think this could have been sorted out in a better way, in a diplomatic way.
Yes.
Why make kind of a shout from the pulpit about these things? If you are a mature nation, you do these things quietly. You get your people to come, and then they say, our intelligence people went to Delhi, they exchanged notes. Our people told them, look, this is not evidence. And moreover, I will end with this, that 3 months or 4 months have passed. What have they done about the investigation? Why haven't they been able to catch the killers? Why haven't they interrogated them? They haven't caught them, so there's no question of interrogating or questioning them. They have nothing.
Yes,
And
it's
then
very
they-
difficult to build the case that they're wanting to build just on the basis of trust me. Because, I'm a first world country and I know it and you must take my
We are
word
a
for it.
Western white nation and you should trust me.
Exactly,
Because
those days
you
have
guys are
gone.
not white.
Exactly. Charlotte, I want to come to you as well. What, according to you, you're of course based in the UK. I want to understand from you, what, according to you, is the message that has gone out in the way Canada has behaved or Justin Trudeau has behaved and in the way that India has responded? Because for us in India, this has very much been about India's dignity. Of course, Khalistani issue is very serious for us. It is about our territorial sovereignty. Even leaving that aside, I think India has made it very clear, and that has been a hallmark of this present government, that you can't push us around. Is that the message that most of the world is receiving?
I think that is absolutely the message, especially of the last few days. We've seen on a deeper state level that it's business as usual. We had the General Major Peter Scott in India for the Indo-Pacific Army Chiefs Conference, biannual event, and talked about being welcomed in India, pleasure to be there, and that army-to-army relations will continue, and government-to-government relations are sort of, he dismissed them and put them to one side. And I think it really speaks of the deeper state continue to be productive and effective between Canada and India, whilst Trudeau is made to look like a fool, pushed out of the workings of his own country. That's how that appears to the public, and it really does show India to be responding in a patient and I would say far more diplomatic manner. Jaishankar's just I think he's still in Washington, or he's just been in Washington.
He is, yes.
And the conversations, yes, they've touched on Canada and Trudeau's comments, but in the main, they've been about Ukraine, they've been about tech innovation, and they've been about follow-ups from the G20. And it really just shows you it's business as usual, and India is important. And I think that's something that Trudeau failed to realize. And I do think that this was a Trudeau move,
Yes.
and we will perhaps see that more and more as we go on and look at this issue. And the other thing that's happened is this has been a considerable amount of time between making these allegations and there being no evidence or particular evidence given to the Indian government. And that's been a real time for introspection and reflection for states. And you have certain intellectuals as well as government officials actually looking at the Khalistan issue for the very first time. And what we see when we look at the Khalistan issue is it's, this deep, and the activism is nefariously difficult, violent, and based on a lot of misinformation. And misinformation from those who spend any time reading is very easy to then unpick. And so I think, people are starting to read, they're starting to do their own investigations, they're starting to read Terry's book, as I definitely am. And they're realizing that this doesn't have any foundation. And that causes Trudeau to probably feel very personally embarrassed himself. He may realize he's even been taken for a ride.
Yes. Well, there are already those reports floating in Canadian media that somehow this has been the machinations of those behind the government, the CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence and all that. I'll go to Terry on how he reads those reports. Is this a way that is being given to Trudeau to kind of salvage some face? But Tara Katta is also joining us. Ma'am, thanks a lot for your time. I think what is coming to in very quick time, for example, when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out and India was not willing to condemn Russia, and the entire European and American world was breathing down our neck, we stood firm. And in 1 year's time, it was a full circle. Well, even the European countries realized that India actually getting oil from Russia and passing that oil to others saved the world from extreme high, oil and energy prices. So actually India did great service to the world, and the world, it came full 360. I think on the Canadian issue as well, it's come a full circle much sooner, because in many ways Justin Trudeau's action, whether a gimmick or not, helped India in establishing the fact that they're not going to be bullied, they're not going to be afraid, they're going to stand their ground. And secondly, it has shined a light on the Khalistani movement based in Canada. In fact, their own justice and legal system.
It certainly had a very good effect in Canada in that sense. One of
Terry,
the
Terry, I'm going to come to you. Terry, I'm going to come to you. This is for Tarakarta that I'm coming to you.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yes.
Not at all. I'm sure Terry knows. He's written on this. He knows a good deal about it.
Yes.
But Shivani, you're absolutely right. In terms of how it has come around.
Yes.
In how we've managed to get, it's just worked out that way, because for ages, everybody knew that, okay, the Khalistanis are there. In fact, we shouldn't even be calling them Khalistanis, because there's no Khalistan, right? There are just these troublemakers who call themselves XYZ who are there, and who were doing a lot of things which, by the way, after examining Canadian law, it is not allowed even under their laws.
Yes, it isn't.
It's not allowed. So they did nothing. So Trudeau, like you said, has unwittingly brought the whole thing on stage. And in what I like to think is that his accusation in Parliament and the referendum going on outside was on the same day, which was politically, it was catastrophic, right? On a serious note, the point is that much of this started last year, if you remember, with the Amritpal Singh saga, then it followed his arrest. And at that time, I remember on your show saying that this is going to have repercussions. That happened across all these countries, which coincidentally perhaps are all Five Eyes countries. I'd like to think that's a coincidence, because we have no. So now what we need to do, what these countries need to do, is to get together and find out how did this happen. Simultaneously in London, in the US, in Australia, in Canada, and even in New Zealand.
Yes.
So
It's actually good for us when these elements get a little emboldened, because the moment they get cocky is when their downfall begins.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. But I think this is where intelligence sharing should come in. Canada and I'm assuming we don't have much intelligence sharing, because, nothing happened, right? After we kept complaining and all the rest of it. Now is the time, I think, to pick up on that and get the US going, because nobody likes their soil being used for to getting this kind of a huge across the world going.
Okay.
It's organized. There's no two ways on that. It's an organized thing.
Yes. So, Terry, I want your opinion on exactly this. What this episode has done, whether it is completely right or not, is not my contention, because it's not my intention to run down Canada in any way. But what it has done is, it has brought its murky past with Khalistani elements to the fore. It has raised a question mark on their investigation capabilities, their intelligence, their political maturity, all of that. So, do you believe that it has indeed ended up being more of an embarrassment? The entire episode could have been avoided, not just for Justin Trudeau, but just for a lot of other Canadian agencies.
Well, there are two separate questions. I think there's the question of the immediate issue of, did India or did it not come into Canada and commit murder? If that happened, then it's a very serious thing. And the problem on that front is that Justin Trudeau has still absurdly not revealed the evidence. I don't think there's any excuse for it. He can't throw up his hands and say, oh, it's classified, I don't want to interfere with the investigation. He's already done that. He's announced the conclusion to the investigation by kicking out an Indian diplomat. There's no excuse that I can see for refusing to reveal what he has. And in the absence of that, nothing's going to change it. The relationship is not going to move forward at all until he fixes that problem. But then there's a second issue that you've raised. The good news here is that Canadians have slept through the rise of Khalistani propaganda in Canada, the normalization of martyr posters of mass murderers like the Kanishka bomber Telvinda Parmar, the diorama in the streets of Toronto celebrating the assassination of Indira Gandhi, the killer posters naming and shaming Indian diplomats, painting targets on their backs, offering cash rewards for their home addresses. This is outrageous, and Canada needs to do something about it. And the Canadian public, which for 40 years, Mr. Chakrabarti was right about how long this has been going on. For 40 years, they've been looking the other way. This is not a story that reflects well on Canada after the Air India bombing, where we failed to stop it, even though we had the suspects under surveillance, and then afterwards failed to deliver some justice to the
Terry,
victims' families.
will that change happen
now?
now?
Changing.
Will that change happen now?
I'm coming to your point that they are changing. The public is now taking a second look because it's front page news and they can barely ignore it anymore. And they're realizing, who is this guy, Nijjar? And then they see the videotape of one of Nijjar's speeches in his Gurdwara, where he was the president and where he met his maker on the 18th. And he's saying, he's praising to the skies these assassins of Indira Gandhi, the assassins of General Vaidya, the assassins of Chief Minister Bayant Singh of Punjab in 95, and on and on and on. The blood-curdling speech praising assassins and murder. And they're looking at, what about, who is this seeks for justice? They haven't paid any attention. Indians know about this, but Canadians have not been paying attention. Now they're waking up and they're realizing, you know what? I don't think I'm going to shed any tears for Mr. Nijjar.
Exactly.
Now, this is an interesting change, and it may propel the government under pressure from the public, especially with an election in the offing and the Prime Minister on very thin ice in the polls. He would lose if there was an election tomorrow. There's little question of that. In that environment, I think this switch, this change in public attitudes is going to have a very good effect.
Okay, we'll wait for that. Terry, just hold your thought. Speaking of S Jaishankar, I'm getting some updates coming in because the External Affairs Minister has addressed the India-Canada issue one more time. He has mentioned that he talked about this with Jack Sullivan and Secretary Blinken. He added that India is open to look into the issue. This is another statement that S Jaishankar has made just a short while ago. He has said that yes, the Canadian Prime Minister made some allegations initially privately and then publicly, and our response to him both in private and public was that what he was alleging was not consistent with our policy, and that if his government had anything relevant and specific they would like us to look into, we are open to doing so. Let me quickly play an excerpt of what Jaishankar has said.
Okay. So let me start with Canada. Yes, the Canadian Prime Minister made some allegations, initially privately and then publicly. And our response to him, both in private and public, were that what he was alleging was not consistent with our policy, and that if his government had anything relevant and specific they would like us to look into, we were open to looking at it. Now, that's where that conversation is at this point of time. But to understand that conversation, you have to also appreciate that this has been an issue of great friction for many years with Canada, in fact going back to the 1980s. Then it became dormant, but in the last few years it has come back very much into play because of what we consider to be a very permissive Canadian attitude towards terrorists, extremists, people who openly advocate violence. And they have been given operating space in Canada because of the compulsions of Canadian politics. I don't think most Americans, for Americans, perhaps Canada looks very different. But it depends, from where the interest, where the shoe pinches. For us, it has certainly been a country where organized crime from India mixed with trafficking in people mixed with secessionism, violence, terrorism. It's a very toxic combination of issues and people who have found operating space there. So a lot of our tensions with Canada.
All right. So, the External Affairs Minister has made some very strong observations once again, reiterating India's stance, one that we're willing to look at any specific information. And this is what they've conveyed to Canada in the past too. But, what's interesting, and this is exactly what we've been discussing. I want to go across to our guests as well. Mr. Chakrabarti, I'm coming to you once again. What this episode has done is given India the stage to talk about that toxic, heady mix of terror sympathy plus gang violence plus organized crime, everything that Jaishankar and Indian External Affairs Ministry has talked about. They have given us the opportunity and the stage to now say this on the global stage.
Prime Minister Trudeau opened the innings.
Yes.
And, with all these allegations. And we are not going to just sit back and say, okay, you are such a nice looking chap. We are going to accept your allegations. And we will sit back and it's coming from a developed G7 country. So naturally, as a developing country, India has to accept it. Those days are gone. Those days are gone, long gone. India is not going to accept these kind of, false allegations and sit back. We are going to hit back. And that is what exactly we have done.
Right.
We have asked for the evidence, which is not forthcoming. But we are not going to sit back and say, look, you can say what you like, we accept it, etc. and all that. We are going to hit back. And that is what we do.
Yes, and Jaishankar is of course being feted and credited with this very strong, some would say muscular, but very potent foreign affairs strategy. And he also does it in a very cogent, very elusive, in a manner which is, extremely suave, and he's doing a great job of that. And that is why people find it a little bit hard, because he's doing it in the most sophisticated manner, speaking in a language that the West understands, and kind of maybe killing with kindness.
Let me tell you that I know Jaishankar for 45 years.
Yes,
we are the
sir.
same time of the Indian Foreign Service.
Yes.
And I know him very well. And I know where he's coming from. So what you are saying is absolutely right. He's going to take this battle into Canada.
Right. No, what I just meant is that, he's not... He knows exactly what he needs to say, how much he needs to say for his point to go across, not confrontational and, not in any way acting in a manner that is going to bring the heat to India. All right, final comments to all of our guests. Charlotte, the other lesson in this is that you've got to be economically strong to be able to take the heat from the world. And, the reason why, let's say, the Five Eyes countries or US, UK are not willing to throw India under the bus is because India is economically strong today. And that's really the real politic as far as global affairs and diplomacy is concerned.
Yeah, and as everyone knows here, we're pursuing a trade agreement of our own between the UK and India that has been stalled perhaps because of our very problematic approach to Khalistani extremism in the UK. So yes, absolutely, especially speaking from a post-Brexit point of view in the UK, we're looking to diversify, and we see India as a very important partner in that. We share democratic values, we share liberal values, we share defence interests. We have a large Indian diaspora that already contributes hugely to our economy. And we want to see tariffs reduced and movement of skilled workers, no matter what Suella Braverman may have you think. So, yeah, this is very important for the UK, and we take this very seriously. So now it is a time, as I have said already, it is a time for introspection on how we have treated the Khalistani issue.
Yes.
And I care very much as a counter-extremism professional, and my past in counter-terrorism for the UK government, I care very much about this issue. I see this as a terrorism threat. I see threats to British Sikhs who stand up against Khalistan, and I see our current government not understanding and framing that in the right way and not approaching that in the right way. And I really hope through the research that we're conducting at the International Centre for Sustainability at the moment and my personal interest in this topic, that we'll be able to see a change in position from the government towards Khalistani extremism, and that this will not be a block between the UK and India moving forward.
Yes. Tarakat, I want to take that point forward with you. As India becomes more important economically, globally, and diplomatically, do you believe that a lot of these other countries, I'm not sure about Canada, I'll give Terry a last word on that, but some of the other countries are going to wean away from some of these strategies of mollycoddling Khalistanis or anti-India agents?
See, the main point is, as you grow economically, your diaspora also is proud of you. You know, they shift in the way they look at you. They're saying, I'm proud to be Indian, which was not the case 10 years earlier. So we need to really care. We haven't really done enough for the diaspora in terms of soft power, in terms of projecting ourselves. Now the Modi government is doing a lot. But yes, I think you're right. The more you come with dollars in your pocket, the more likely people are going to listen to you.
Yes, that's just how it goes. I've got 30 seconds left. I'll give Terry the last word. Terry, you heard, I think, what the External Affairs Minister was saying. He's shining internal light on the ganglands of Canada. Your comments on that?
Well, I think one thing we all know about Mr. Jaishankar is that he chooses his words carefully, and I suggest that we should all pay attention. This is now the second time that he has used this phrase, that if something happened, it was not consistent with our policy. Now, that doesn't exclude the fact that something may have happened that was against policy. Believe it or not, things that are against policy happen in Canada too. Maybe there's a window there opening for the two sides to say, well, okay, maybe one of our guys was involved, but he wasn't working for us. We never liked him anyway. There may be a window of opportunity to settle this.
All right. Window of opportunity. Mr. Chakravarti, you want to take 15 seconds? You concur with what Terry is saying, reading into Jaishankar's statement?
I think Terry is overpassing it a bit. But I want to leave you with just one thought. And your view, that just consider it and think about it and sleep over it. That these events, the Khalistanis, Allah is right, we shouldn't be calling them that. But these guys, whoever they are, and call themselves Khalistanis, why are they why are they so active in the Five Eyes countries?
Yes. That question has come up.
Is it a coincidence? I leave it.
Right. We will leave our audiences with that thought, because that question has been discussed in India. Is that a coincidence alone? A big thanks to all of our guests for joining us. Moving on to something different, it's raining medals at the Asian Games 2023, and our shooters have had their best ever outing at the tournament. Joining me is Aishwarya Tomar, who's the 22-year-old shooter, bagging 4 medals at the Asian Games in the rifle competitions. He's bagged the men's 50-meter 3-position silver after the team event gold, also the 10-meter air rifle bronze, along with the 10-meter air rifle team gold. Aishwarya, many congratulations to you. So 4 out of the 6 rifle indoor event medals have actually featured you. Quite a dream performance, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. काफ़ी अच्छा एक्सपीरियंस रहा है यहाँ पे, और जैसे मेरा ये पहला ही एशियन गेम्स का कंपटीशन था, और इसी में मैंने 2 टीम गोल्ड, जिसमें दोनों वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड बनाए हैं, और एक इंडिविजुअल सिल्वर मेडल और एक इंडिविजुअल ब्रॉन्ज मेडल जीता है।
बिल्कुल। आप अपनी परफॉर्मेंस से बहुत सैटिस्फाइड होंगे, उसके बारे में कुछ और बताइए।
मैम, पर्सनली तो जैसे हमने काफ़ी इस कंपटीशन के लिए काफ़ी मेहनत करी है, हार्डवर्क किया है, और काफ़ी खुशी होती है जब हम इतना हार्डवर्क करते हैं और हमारे जो गोल्स होते हैं हम उनको अचीव करते हैं। तो मैं ऐसा मतलब पर्सनली मैं काफ़ी खुश हूँ इसके लिए।
तो आप ये जो परफॉर्मेंस रही है, आपकी नहीं पूरी कंटिंजेंट की बहुत अच्छी परफॉर्मेंस रही है इस बार, तो इसका श्रेय आप किसको देते हैं?
मैम, मैं अपनी टीम को देना चाहूँगा, और अपने फ्रेंड और जो हमारे फेडरेशन शूटिंग एकेडमी है, मैं इन सबको ये डेडिकेट करना चाहूँगा।
जी। Aishwarya, can you also give me a sense of, before these Asian Games, was there something particular जिस पे आपने फोकस किया, फिजिकली, मेंटली, किसी चीज पे काम किया जिसकी वजह से इतनी अच्छी परफॉर्मेंस रही?
एशियन गेम पे इसके करीब 2 या 3 महीने पहले जब हमारा टीम सेलेक्ट हुआ था एशियन का और वर्ल्ड चैंपियनशिप का, तो जैसे मैं दोनों इवेंट में मैंने अपना पर्सनल बेस्ट दिया था, तब जाके दोनों इवेंट में मैं एशियन चैंपियनशिप में सिलेक्ट हुआ था। उसी के बाद मैंने फिजिकली और फिजिकली इसी के सोचा और इतना
राइट। एक और सवाल मैं आपसे पूछ लेती हूँ ऐश्वर्या, थोड़ा सा लिंक में इशू लग रहा है, लेकिन आप कितना कॉन्फिडेंट हैं कि आप और जो बाकी शूटिंग कंटिंजेंट है वो आने वाले ओलंपिक्स में अच्छा परफॉर्म कर पाएंगे, क्योंकि पिछले ओलंपिक्स में शूटिंग से काफी डिसअपॉइंटमेंट रही थी।
मैम जैसे हमने पिछले ओलंपिक्स में काफी कुछ सीखा है, अच्छी तैयारी चल रही है और जो गलती हम सीखे अभी हमारे पास ज्यादा
Okay. I think what you were saying was that there's more experience now because of what you have already seen in the Olympics last and because of these new competitions. So therefore the Indian shooting contingent should be able to do much better in the upcoming Olympics. Ashwari Tomar, thanks a lot to you and many congratulations to the entire shooting contingent. And slipping into a very short break, on the other side we'll get you another exclusive conversation. Minas Merchant, journalist, writer, is joining us on his new book, Modi, The Challenge of 2024, where we delve into what is the biggest challenge for Narendra Modi as he seeks a third consecutive term for the first time since Jawaharlal Nehru. Stay tuned.
Every good argument is based on hard facts. Facts that are indivisible and uncompromised. Watch me, Rahul Shivshankar, bring you a clear point of view based on indisputable facts.
The Hard Facts, starting 2nd October, only on CNN News 18. Brought to you by
After Bengaluru Bandh, many pro-Kannada organizations and farmers organizations in the state have called for Karnataka Bandh, disrupting many services here in the state of Karnataka. Despite the fact that the Karnataka state government has maintained that BMTC buses and KSRTC buses are plying throughout the state, the buses here in the state of Karnataka has come down to allow. Now I am accompanied by a few laborers here at the Mysore satellite bus stand. आप कहाँ से हो, कब आए इधर?
आसाम।
आप कब आए इधर?
कल इवनिंग 3 बजे।
क्या बस मिल रहा है इधर?
बस कल से हम यहाँ से बैठे हुए, अभी तक तो मिला नहीं बस। वैसे अभी मतलब अभी टिकट काटा है हमने, तो नाइट 9 बजे बस मिलेगा रात को।
कहाँ जा रहा है आप?
कर्नूल।
सो आप कल से इधर वेट कर रहे हैं बस के लिए?
हाँ, कल से यहाँ पर 3 बजे से वेट कर रहे हैं, अभी तक बस नहीं मिला। अभी सुबह टिकट काटा है तो अभी मिल गया बस।
क्यों नहीं मिल रहा है इधर? आपको यूजुअली ऐसा होता है, तो आप आज नहीं मिल रहा है?
पता नहीं, हमारा फर्स्ट टाइम है इसीलिए हमें इतना पता नहीं है, क्योंकि कल से हम वेट कर रहे थे तो सब लोग को देख रहे थे, तो सब लोग जा रहे थे, हमें सीट नहीं मिल रहा था, तो इस वजह से कल रात को यहीं पर बैठे हुए थे हम, इधर ही रह रहे थे, तो ऐसे चल रहा था।
कंडक्टर साहब इधर क्या बोल रहे हैं आपको?
वो बोल रहे थे, कल बोल रहे थे सीट नहीं है। कोई किसी से भी पूछो बोल रहे सीट नहीं है, आज बस होगा ही नहीं, ऐसा बोल रहे थे कल। मतलब आज सुबह में हम गए थे तो आज सीट हो गया, तो ऐसे बोला गया।
ओके, आप कब जा रहे थे कुरनूल को? टिकट कब मिला है?
टिकट सुबह 7-8 बजे मिला है। हाँ, 9 रात को 9 बजे के, 9:16।
तो आप कल से इधर ही वेट कर रहे हैं?
कल से इधर ही वेट कर रहे हैं।
अच्छा, thank you. So this is a Labour family here waiting from yesterday afternoon 3 p.m. One, the conductor is saying that they're not getting any seats or buses. Today there are unavailability of buses, so they've got a ticket, but at 9 p.m. today. So definitely the Karnataka Bandh has affected the plying of buses in the state of Karnataka, despite the fact that Karnataka state government is maintaining that buses are plying throughout the state.
Minaz Merchant, thanks a lot for speaking to us and many congratulations on your new book, which is delving into the theme of how Narendra Modi is seeking to become the first Prime Minister since Jawaharlal Nehru to get 3 consecutive terms. I want to begin by asking you, what do you make of the biggest challenge? What do you contend is the biggest challenge in front of Narendra Modi as we stand today? Because there's not a lot of time to go before the next 2024 general elections.
Thank you, Shivani, for having me. The main challenge that's facing Mr. Modi is, I think, twofold. One is his performance. In fact, the book talks about his 10 years as Prime Minister. It's not a biography. It's basically across domains, the economy, foreign policy, technology, etc. His performance in 10 years. How that is perceived in the 6 months leading up to the Lok Sabha election. That will be challenge number one, because obviously there are 5 state elections in the next couple of months, and then the Lok Sabha election. So how that will play out. And second is the acronym, the opposition in India, how they get together, or actually there's a centrifugal force which forces them apart, as we are seeing in Punjab, as we've seen in Kerala, and as we've seen in West Bengal. So if India can coalesce together, 28 parties, that will have an effect, and it will be a challenge. So performance of Mr. Modi next 6 months, how we can relay that to the public, which has some sort of an anti-incumbency, and at the same time, India's own glue, whether that sticks or doesn't.
Yeah. So what are those areas? You've obviously divided your book into the 10, covering the 10 years of Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister. So what are those top 3 areas where you think he's done the best, and what have been the failings according to you?
I think the main achievement is across domains, but we start with digital, the digitalization of the economy, the India stack, public digital goods, which is incredible, starting with Aadhaar and going on to UPI and ONDC and all of that, which is internationally recognized. For the first time, I think a brand like UPI is now making waves and is being acknowledged in the UAE, in Singapore, in France, and so on. So definitely that. Number 2 is infrastructure. And I think the massive buildup of infrastructure right up to the LAC on the border, which has military connotations, and also obviously highways, roads, ports, seaports, airports, and the whole gamut of housing and so on. So I think infrastructure is a very big achievement that he's made, and it's really unprecedented in our 76 years of independence. The third is geopolitical. It's not just the G20, but the way he has gone east and west. The Middle East, of course, West Asia, we should call it, geographically, and east. He's been able to fix our relationship with the Middle East. And despite the Ukraine war, he's been able to manage Europe, which continues to seethe internally, but can't do very much about it because India's position is balanced, neutral, and Europe, anyway, is a declining continent. India is a rising subcontinent. So they know exactly where we are going to be in 2029, third largest economy in the world, the largest in the free world, the largest internet market, the largest consumer market, bigger than America and bigger than the EU. So geopolitically, Mr. Modi has played his cards well, used the advantages that the Indian economy and the Indian market offers to him to use.
But what would you feel were the major failings as far as the Narendra Modi 2 terms are concerned?
It's inevitable. Everyone, we're not perfect. And Mr. Modi is not perfect, though he tends to be very good in many ways. But, number one, talent. You've got to infuse more talent, technocratic talent in the cabinet. The first term, he didn't have much of that. Second 5-year term, he's gotten people like Vishal, Chandrasekhar, and most important, Jaishankar. Now, if you have lateral talent of that kind, then double it and treble it in the third term, that would really be a good thing. So that's not a failure, but it's something which has not been fully utilized. Too many people who are yes man, not enough people to dissent, not enough people to say, Prime Minister, we could do this differently, etc., etc. So talent is definitely something that you should be looking at. As far as the deification of Mr. Modi is concerned, now this is controversial, but the whole Modi is India, India is Modi. Mr. Modi himself, and I know this for a fact, is against that. A few years ago, he said, I want to remove the word honorable from Prime Minister. And you'll see everything where Mr. Modi's name is mentioned, the word honorable doesn't exist. It's there for every chief minister. Badel and Gehlot, they're honorable chief minister of Rajasthan. So, but Mr. Modi, not there at all. So he realizes that this deification is not really a good thing. Sycophancy, etc., it leads to a problem. And then, of course, polarization. Now, that a defect, or is he setting the record straight? Because polarization in India began centuries ago. It began in particular in 1947. It accelerated with Muslim first appeasement, but it caused no advantage to Muslims who remained backward and impoverished, as the Vishal and such commission reports all indicate. So by appeasing Muslims and trying to be secular, you're actually being communal. And you're advising the country. Because Hindus, obviously, after 200 years of subjugation, the Mughal Empire first, then the British Empire, where Hindus were in the third tier. Muslims in the British Empire were considered a co-martial race and given a lot of benefits. After 1947, the majority community felt that finally our days arrived. But what happened? Nehru said, no, we've got to have Muslim first secularism. That's not secularism. And I think, I'm not sure if Mr. Modi has been able to deliver the right message on what genuine secularism is, which is appease no one, empower everyone. You've got to be religion neutral. And he says correctly, but I don't know whether the message is relayed properly, that when the food subsidies, the water on tap, the electricity to the last village, all of that go, there's no Hindu or Muslim or Christian written on it. It's completely secular. So all the welfare benefits, water on tap, etc., they are completely religion neutral. So polarization, whether it's a negative or a positive, people talk about majoritarianism, minoritism is also an issue. Whether that message has been delivered, is that a weakness of Mr. Modi? Can he do it better?
His 2 terms are the first 2 terms by a non-Congress government with full majority. So, politically and socially, what is the impact that Narendra Modi has had that is irreversible, that you think?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because the major defect in our social cohesion has been the wrongful message on secularism, liberalism, and nationalism. Let's take it in reverse order. I'll be brief on that. Nationalism is conflated with the European nationalism of the 1930s, which is German, Hitler, Britain, which was also equally bad, colonial, brutal Britain, and Germany, of course. And in the 1930s, we had obviously our freedom fighters, whether it was Subhash Chandra Bose or Mahatma Gandhi. Their definition of nationalism was not expansionary. It was not exclusionary. It was not conquering. It was not aggressive. It was getting rid of a colonial yoke. So when people conflate nationalism, then it's a very bad thing. Last refuge of scoundrels, like patriotism or etc., etc. And patriotism is on the different side of the same coin. They don't understand that nationalism from a colonial subjugated country to protect our national interest, economic security and national security interest, is completely different from the nationalism that people conflate, because they're so used to the colonial narrative of, being a nationalist is terrible because it's, inbred in like Hungary or countries like that, which have these so-called right-wing leaders, Italy as well. So I think nationalism is a good thing if it is practiced in the right way, and to conflate it with European nationalism then and now, a century ago and now, is completely erroneous. Then again, the second thing is, you know as well as I do, liberalism. Liberalism is defined by a few things: openness, tolerance, inclusivity, obviously. But the number of people who think of themselves as liberal are the exact opposite. They're not tolerant. They block you, even without knowing what you're saying. Not only on Twitter, they just boycott you. Not that they are worth anything really in terms of being boycotted by. They're not open-minded. They're not tolerant, as I said, and they're not really inclusive because they have a cabal. And in that little closed club, they don't welcome any outsider who might give a different point of view and shatter their wrongful narrative. Because they know that they are on a weak wicket. In their heart of hearts, they know that they're talking rubbish. But no one so far has been able to expose that rubbish in the way it should be. And finally, on secularism. Genuine secularism appease none, empower everyone. 4 words, defines everything. And if you have Muslim first resources, like Manmohan Singh said, that's communal. Any kind of polarization is communal. We have had Muslim polarization for 70 years. Now we have majoritarian polarization. Definitely that's going on. It's a reaction to the decades-long Muslim polarization. I'm against both. Everything should be agnostic. Not agnostic in terms of belief or non-belief, but we've got to be religion-agnostic, religion-neutral. And that secularism has been misdefined, and the people who set themselves up as secular are actually communal. They're just dressed up as with a secular mask. Inside that mask, they're communal.
Namaste, Jai Hind and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narsimhan. Ladies and gentlemen, Foreign Minister S Jaishankar confirming that Canada was indeed discussed with Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, but he's also said that the issue raised was about the safety of Indian diplomats. He said Indian diplomats are unsafe, publicly intimidated. That's the charge that was laid. And there was a compulsion. India was compelled to suspend visa services because of the actions what were happening on ground in Canada. More importantly, he's also touched upon an unnamed nation to the Western world. Somewhere deterring from even taking the name of a very, very pesky neighbor, which in the past had enjoyed a lot of the West's patronage. You know who we are talking about, just like Dr. Jaishankar knew who we are all talking about, but would not take its name. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam has now got the signature of the President, as President Draupadi Murmu has given assent to this bill. But very clearly, it will take some time to implement the bill or the bill to come into fruition, because we've got to get the census and the delimitation, and thereafter the allocation of these seats will happen. Perhaps, hopefully, by Lok Sabha 2029. Meanwhile, we're doing quite well at the Asian Games. 4th overall in the medals tally, 32 medals in our